Got any old business?
Old business.
Yeah. So you always start with the old business.
Oh, that go over the notes or
Anything unfinished,
Yeah.
old business, I can't think of anything.
no.
It's also hard, too, because I do have a bunch of things I want to talk about, but I have to save that for next week when we do our yearly recap and goals.
Yes.
So most of them go in the goals category. New business.
New business.
That would also probably go in next week's
Yeah.
goals episode would be new business. New business as far as I am concerned. It's cold. It's rainy. It's turning to ice tomorrow. Work has been pretty shitty because of the holidays. And I am not going to finish Alan Moore's Jerusalem by the new year, most likely.
But you did get over the halfway point, though.
Yeah, I'm closing on 700 pages. But the problem is I've been going days without reading it at a time now because I've been doing a lot of submissions and writing and stuff. Like, I've been busy. And I just, by the time it's time, I get around to reading it, it's like, oh, I'll read a page and go to bed.
Yeah.
So that's kind of disappointing because I was hoping to be way ahead of that. Also, we have decided, before I jump into my other big books for the next year's reads, we are going to do another Murakami Minute real quick.
Yeah,
Real quick, just a minute.
Yeah, just a minute.
Just a minute. We thinking Dance, and I think it's something pinball. I can't remember for the life of me. I have it upstairs, so we will look at that and I don't know. We'll post about it or something if people want to read up on it. I'm going to read a bunch of comics and stuff before we get to that.
Good palate cleanser.
Yeah, just because Jerusalem need a little break from the big books for at least like 2 weeks.
Yeah.
What about you? Anything?
No, nothing really. Just preparing for the winter wonderland that is about to be the next few days.
Yay!
It does make me feel better that it seems like it's everywhere.
Yeah, everybody's getting it, which I like.
Yeah, like it's just not like us in like like shitty Pennsylvania and like the Northeast. It's like no, it's like even in like the South, it's getting like all cold and shitty and stuff.
Take that South.
So it's nice. Like I know, like a couple of days ago, over in California, they were complaining that it was like 40 or 50 degrees or something, and it's like,
yeah,
sons of bitches.
Oh, it's 60 degrees. Yeah, whatever. Anyway, folks, thank you for listening. If you're from California, jealous of your weather. So I guess we'll just go into our recap after these breaking messages. We don't have messages. One day,
news.
People apparently like our YouTube podcast, which is just the same as you're listening now, no video. So I don't know why we get some random viewers on there, but whatever. Thanks for subscribing, 36 people or whoever follow that. That's always been the backup just in case this gets deleted somehow.
Right.
But anyway, I like it. Maybe one day we'll actually have video. Who knows? We'll see how busy we get next year, and maybe I'll do some promotion.
See, I feel like people who'd one video, they only went in until then they would get it, and they'd be like, oh, God, no, go back to just the audio.
You know what's interesting? Because I listen to that Art of Manliness podcast every once in a while. Usually if they just have a topic I like sometimes they talk about, I don't know, like Miyamoto Musashi or Hemingway or just maybe some interesting topics about like fitness and stuff. And I found out in one of the recent episodes I was listening to, the host, I think his name is Brett McKay, they don't do video, which I was like, okay. And I looked him up on YouTube and it's just audio. I was like, oh, okay. So they're kind of like us with that, but it's like one of the biggest podcasts out. But I was like, that's interesting. But I found out that he also, because he always has guests on, they're just talking to each other, no video.
Oh,
neither of them likes it, but like Brett specifically, he doesn't like to look at like somebody through a screen, like when he has a guest on. So they just never have that. I'm like, I don't know if that'd be weird or better now that I think about it. Like because it would just be like, having someone on the phone, like old radio.
Yeah.
It's like, would you think that'd be better if we had a guest on and you just couldn't see them? Because like I always thought, his audio is always so good. It's never any robotic. Because some of the podcasts I hear is always, it gets like those robotic. It's because they're on like, Google Hangouts or Zoom or something. I think the video fucks it up. So
that makes sense.
I don't like, as I was thinking about our setup, it's always like we have to fuck around with it to get them so they can see both of us in the picture. Because the table's not like long enough where if we have the webcam set up, they can see both of us perfectly in their view. So I'm just thinking maybe we just don't do that. But then I feel like the social cues of like when to talk and when not talk would be kind of hard. I don't know. Be interesting to try one without video. Maybe we get Ash on, like, hey Ash, instead of walking around your house, just sit down and we'll just talk to you.
I mean, you can still walk around. We just don't have to get dizzy watching you.
Yeah. Anyway, we are going to be recapping because it's this is right before Christmas. It's going to air right after Christmas. We're just going to recap the books we read this year and stuff. So not a real interesting episode unless you want to know what we've been reading, which we always talk about anyway. Yeah. But we'll break down very briefly, not the synopsis or anything, most likely just, how we felt about some of these books. And not all the books. I read a lot. So stick around and, yeah. You are listening to the Drunken Pen Bright Team podcast, motherfudgers. I am your host, Caleb James. With me today, Spencer, the knee knocker of Nepal Church. I didn't know if it's Napoleon or just so I'm just gonna go of Nepal.
Nepal's?
Like a person from Nepal.
Yeah.
I don't know. Anyway, I should bring up my list. Am I going first? Is that how this works? I usually go first.
Yeah, you normally have the bigger list.
I breathe real hard. Ooh, I like that noise. So, Spencer, according to Goodreads, I have read 55 books this year. But the thing I don't like about Goodreads, you can't have separate categories. I mean, you can catalog them separately, but you can't have, I read this many short stories, this many comics, this many graphic novels. It just all lumps into books.
Yeah. So
my numbers are always inflated because of that, because I always make sure I read a lot of short stories and some of them are just because they're long, like some Edgar Allan Poe stories or something. They're just classified as a one short story versus me saying, I read his whole collection. So that always fluffs up my numbers some. So I never get a completely accurate. That's why I always made my list high.
Yeah.
Because if I'm just going straight novels, it's probably 30 or 40 maybe. So I don't know, but I'm just gonna cover them all. So Spencer, the church man.
Yes.
I started the year off on such a high note because it was winter time. I read The Quick and the Dead, Selected Stories by Martino Cayan. As of recent memory, this is my favorite story collection I've read.
Okay.
Not that I read a whole lot of, I probably read some Stephen King maybe last year or the year before, but just as far as a literary style too, this has probably been my favorite because I'm pretty sure I read a Hemingway collection this year, but I don't think it's on my list that I noticed.
Was it the PBS one?
Yeah. Was that this?
I couldn't remember if that
had
was
to be
this year
this
or
year.
last year.
Maybe it was last year. I don't know. Because that was pretty good, but this one, it just had some stories that just break your heart. Some stories were just ridiculously funny. I would say gut-bustingly funny, like his one Kafka-esque story. Martino Cayan's one of those guys, I really wish he wrote a lot more stuff, especially novels, because he only wrote one book, I think, and then a bunch of short stories.
I'd say that's an awesome title.
Yeah, The Quick and the Dead. Next up, I read The Fight by Norman Mailer. That was about the Rumble in the Jungle, I believe. Ollie Foreman. I really enjoyed that book, though I could see Norman Mailer's one of those Hemingway kind of guys. He was writing real masculine, and prose wasn't something that very really captured me, but his fight descriptions were amazing. Okay. Him just talking about the fights and stuff was awesome. I read The Two Towers by Tolkien. Bog Bodies by Declan Shalvey. I think that was one of our...
That was one of the comic book club.
Yeah. I liked the idea, but I did not like the execution of that book. I can't recommend that. Devil in the Blue Dress by Walter Mosley. You can listen to us talk about that. We had at least one episode on it. Excellent.
Definitely want to check out more in the Rollins, Easy Rollins series.
Yeah, definitely. The Frolic of the Beast by Yukio Mishima. This was one of my lesser Mishimas. It says here I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. It was all right. One of those ones very beautiful imagery, very poetic. Not the theme I really care for. Because he and a lot of other Japanese writers, they have these themes of damaged beauty. And it's okay, I get it. Yeah. You can only read that so much before you're all right. Yeah. You wrote 5 books on this now, dude. Something else. Talk about something else. Anything else. I did Saga Volume 1 by Brian K. Vaughan. I really want to read more of that, but there's a lot.
Yeah, and it's not even over yet.
Not even over yet. That'd be one of those ones I get in one of those mega omnibus things.
Right.
Poems of the Irish People. This is just various. It was a poetry collection. I liked it, though it's very different from most poetry I've been reading because it's all, for the most part, from what I remember, rhyming poetry, old-timey, But some of it's hard to understand because it's old Irish. The Fortress of the Pearl by Michael Moorcock. That was one of the second book I read in the Ulrica Melnibone series, second or third. I really, really liked that. I gave that 5 stars. Maniac of New York, The Death Train by Elliot Callan. That's just a fun book.
Yes.
Wasn't good. I'll be honest.
Yeah.
It's like a Friday the 13th. Is
Yeah.
it good? Is it a good movie like any other Friday the 13th movie? Not really. Not really, but they're fun.
Yeah.
There's murder, and that's all you really want. So good is subjective in terms of that kind of stuff. So as a slasher, it's great. I loved it.
Yeah.
But as just like a comic with a good story, I just want the killing.
The murder.
I actually read this before, but I reread it this year along with the audio version. That was I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream by Harlan Ellison. I keep telling you, listen to the audio version of him reading it. It's not that long. You'll fucking dig it, man. Just listen to it one day at work. I don't know. Maybe not at work, actually.
But you're saying maybe not read at work might give me some bad ideas?
Yeah, don't listen to it at work. It's very depressing.
Oh.
Not All Robots by Mark Russell. It says here I really like that. I don't...
It's that one where, like, all the people, like, living in those dome cities and they each have a robot, but the robots are the ones that go to work to make the money and stuff like that.
Yeah, that was interesting. The Return of the King by Tolkien. That was my finale of The Lord of the Rings. Excellent. One of my favorite books of all time.
Is that out of the whole trilogy? That's your favorite?
Yeah. Maybe not. I don't know. That's a hard one because the first one's really good too. Next up, Not So Good. It was all right. I enjoyed it enough, but it's not something I would read again. Later by Stephen King.
Yeah.
Just like fun. It should have went more the way I wanted it. You know, like the more paranormal, just like the cool way he was going with the story. He just kind of, like if they did a sequel, I'd be all for it. Like a paranormal detective kind of deal. I read The Jaunt by Stephen King. That's one of the most fucked up sci-fi horror stories I've ever read. Gone to See the Riverman by Christopher Triana. That is gross.
Yeah.
I don't think it's considered like a splatter porn or splatter punk or whatever they call that, but it's close. It's supposed to be like one of those gross out kind of books, but it's supposed to have an edgy, hard-nosed storyline, but it's just like the characters are so fucking horrible. You're like, oh. And I don't mean like written horribly, I just mean like awful people. You don't root for anybody in that kind of book. Outer Dark by Cormac McCarthy. That was excellent. I really, really enjoyed that.
That's his like sci-fi one, right?
No.
No?
Outer Dark is about an Appalachian brother and sister who have a baby, and the brother like tries to kill the baby, like leaving it in the woods, and there's a whole bunch of crazy shit that happens. Oblivion Stories by David Foster Wallace. We covered this.
Your favorite?
And the a very detailed inebriated reading challenge. So if you want to see the IRC or listen to the IRCs on that, please do, because it's fucked. Like it just progressively seemed to get worse.
It's like you guys had like a bad time reading that.
Yeah, like the thing was, we got this Stockholm syndrome kind of thing going on where like halfway through we're like, no, this is pretty good. Like we were like pointing out things, trying to make it better than I think it was. But then on reflection, which you could probably get in the last episode, like,
no, this is terrible.
I like 2 of these stories and that was it. Fortunately, The Milk by Neil Gaiman and illustrated by Scotty Young. That's a kid's book. I can't judge it, honestly. Not even just like a kid's book. Like it's for literal children, like toddlers. Robert Frost, Selected Poems by Robert Frost. I actually did not care for that. I only like some of them, which is surprising because the Robert Frost I was aware of up to that point I always liked. But then when I actually got deep into his collection, it was too old-timey. Not necessarily the poetry style, but like he did a lot of like narrative poems, and I didn't know what the fuck he was talking about. Black Science Volume 1, How to Fall for Something or Other here, by Rick Remender. I was not interested in reading any more of that.
Yeah, you wasn't a fan of that.
It wasn't awful. The art was all right. It just like it was mid. The Epic of Gilgamesh by Anonymous. I did not care for the Epic of Gilgamesh that much. I rated it 3 out of 5, but I feel like that's probably just like because it's one of the first things ever written.
Yeah,
I'll give them a break. Star by Yukio Mishima. That was an interesting book. I like that. Had a really cool cover. It was like looked like shattered glass. That I would recommend you check that one out because it's a really short novel and it's just about it's like about an actor and I forget exactly what happens, but it was pretty cool. Pictures by J.R.R. Tolkien. That was just his illustrated collection, and it did have like things prose and stuff with it, but it wasn't like an actual book, but it was pretty cool. I really like that. Flashpoint by Jeff Johns. I didn't think that was awful or good, just middle. Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man by James Joyce. I really liked it, but I had parts where I was falling asleep. But it had one of the most graphically, and I don't mean graphic as in gross or, nudity or harsh language or anything, just most graphically evil or awful depictions of hell I've ever come across. Like, it was like, after I read that, like, that was one of the few times, like, not only did I have dreams about that for a little bit, but I was almost like, I get it. Like, if I was a Catholic kid and they taught me this, like, the way that he describes it in there, because it was from the perspective of a Catholic priest, I think, talking about it. I was just like, I would be traumatized, and I would definitely be like, I don't want to go there.
You would buy it in a hook, line, and sinker.
Yeah, it was so bad. Like that. Like, if you want to, just get that book or find a cheap, like, or a free PDF or something, and just find that section of it, because it'll fuck you up. Ooh, we did this together. A Study in Scarlet by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle.
Yep.
That was pretty good. It had a whole Western part that you know what? Listen to the episode, folks.
Yeah.
We covered that. That wasn't that long ago, was it?
A couple months ago.
Yeah. Gideon Falls Volume 1 by Jeff Lemire. Excellent.
Yes.
And you gave me they actually get with like kind of omnibuses or something,
yeah,
like the full,
like mini omnibus. It's the whole series collected in 2 nice, like, oversized hardcovers.
So I will be checking that out here after Jerusalem. Frog Catchers by Jeff Lemire. Excellent. Did you read that yet?
I read it a while ago, and I just never thought to bring it up to you.
Yeah, we should have talked about that, but it's too late now. May's book by Jeff Lemire, also excellent. Though that was pretty close to Frog Catcher in the themes, like the same exact theme.
And you can definitely tell, like, now looking back at Frog Catcher, because, like, even in Maze Runner, in the afterwards and stuff, he talks about reading Murakami and, like, how it kind of influenced him. And now thinking back, I could probably see it in the in Frog Catcher too, because it was another kind of like those weirdly
dreamlike labyrinths and just weird visuals. Yeah, it's definitely like that. Dubliners by James Joyce. That's his short story collection. I was actually pretty disappointed by that. I was expecting more. Like, they say The Dead is supposed to be the best short story ever written. And until I got to the end, which the end is actually amazing. Like, it's one of the best endings of anything. But the story itself, a lot of it was just like this buildup that I didn't care about. I think it falls into the category of maybe too literary and too niche of a, like, because it's, in Dublin. Everything's about Dublin. So people in Dublin in late 1800s, early 1900s, I don't know shit about that.
Right.
So it wasn't necessarily up my alley. But I like James Joyce's writing style enough. I read Coraline by Neil Gaiman. Again, kid's book. This is a little more grown-up kid's book, like early teens, tweens. That's good for what it is. If you were a young person, you probably think it's the best thing ever. Crossover Volume 1, Kids Love Chains by Donny Cates. I hated that.
Yeah, you did not like that one.
I did not like that one. The Sirens of Titan by Kurt Vonnegut Jr. You can listen to our episode about that as well. We did, I think, a book of the month on it. Really, really interesting idea. Not the best execution, but memorable enough that unlike some of these other ones, I didn't forget anything about it.
Right.
Pretty good. Maniac of New York, The Bronx is Burning. That's the second volume of Maniac of New York by Elliot Callan. Same thing. Just great killing.
Yeah, more murder.
Not a good story, really, but good killing. Lots of stabbing, cleaving, burning. Mm-hmm. I want more, though. I did want more gruesomeness. They should have leaned even more heavily into just the murder.
Maybe in the third volume.
I hope so. High Adventure in the Great Outdoors by Henry Rollins. That was really weird because I expected a book because that's in that collection I have of his first 5 novels. But they're not really novels. It's broken up into just little vignettes, maybe. It'll be like a paragraph or 2 of him just talking about some random event or small story. Then it'll go into like these weird little poems, and then it'll go into completely different stories. Like, nothing's cohesive. There's no plot or anything. It's literally just like his thoughts and his musings as he was on the road and growing up and stuff. Interesting, but that's one is like I would recommend people check it out for it being different, but I don't. Well, it's its own category.
Could you imagine trying to be his editor and trying to wrangle him in? Like, no, you're just gonna let him go and do whatever, and you're just gonna publish it.
Yeah, you don't really have a choice. Deceased by Tom Taylor. That was the DC zombie.
Yeah.
Some of the people in our book club I remember didn't like that so much. I thought it was good.
Yeah, I really like that series. They're actually like halfway through the last, because they have a couple volumes of that, and this is supposed to be like the last volume of it, and I've liked them all. I thought it was really interesting and it was really good.
Fun.
Yes.
Harmless fun, except for if you lived in that world.
Yeah, well.
Next, this is my sleeper pick of the year. I was
yeah?
very surprised how much I liked this book. Life of Maggot by Paul Jameson. This is written in like a medieval folk style. It's very different. I haven't read anything like this before. It was so good I actually went and purchased his other book. I think it was his first book, Nightjar. I haven't gotten to reading that yet, but very interesting writing style. And I actually wanted to reach out to him, like, hey, you want to come on the podcast? But he seems like he might be a bit reclusive. But I'd want to read his other book before I did that. But just a lot of cool, like, Celtic imagery, and just, like, it's post-apocalyptic, too, though. So think, like, medieval language, post-apocalyptic world, modern world. Weird, right? It's hard to imagine.
Yeah. Because you almost kind of think, like, medieval in itself is, like, its own kind of, like, apocalyptic kind of, like...
But that's why it blends so well. But that was one of those books we picked up when we got that big batch, that big haul of indie books. Like, I did a call-out a year or two ago. And I'm so glad he told us, hey, hop on my book, because I really liked it. The Telltale Heart by Edgar Allan Poe, excellent.
Have you not read that before?
Oh, I have.
Oh, that's what I thought. Okay.
This year I did a Poe reading for the month of October, where I read my favorite Poe stories. And some new ones, I think, but I, did my favorites. The Premature Burial by Edgar Allan Poe, excellent. The Black Cat by Edgar Allan Poe, my favorite so far. No. Second favorite, maybe tied. The Cask of Amontillado, probably my favorite, but the Black Cat's really close. Also, similar, and not necessarily. The Black Cat is the Cask of Amontillado with the ending of the Telltale Heart.
Okay.
If you think of it that way, kind of. But with a cat. I would recommend any of those three as your first pose. The Dreaming City by Julian Blondell. That was the Elric of Melniboné graphic novel.
Oh, okay.
I believe that was the Titan. Is that who puts that out?
Maybe.
I can't tell. Because there's older versions too. Like they did like a reboot new series. And I got, I think, 2 volumes of that, and then one of the old original collection. I have not read the original. The Silmarillion by Tolkien. Amazing. Fuck, hard to read. Holy shit. That's like one of those things where once you get done reading that, if you're able to understand any of it, you level up.
Right, yeah.
And I've leveled up multiple times this year, I feel, and that was one of the main reasons. That I would not recommend to anyone outside of Tolkien fan, because you're not going to get you're not going to get it at all. Another excellent book, which I kind of figured this one was going to be great. The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn by Mark Twain. Really, really like that. Wish I read that a lot sooner. The next one, this could be a close second sleeper. If it wasn't for the fact that this was recommended, like this was recommended to us, so we kind of expected it was going to be good, or else I would get this sleeper status. Chasing the Boogeyman by Richard Chismar, which we covered for Halloween. You can listen to that episode. Excellent. I really like that. A lot of fun. As fun as grisly murders in a small town can be. The Eternals by Neil Gaiman. I hated that.
Yeah.
Hated it. I don't even think I read the whole thing, did I? Maybe I bailed on that.
You might have.
I don't remember. I didn't like that. Creepshow Volume 1 by Chris Burnham, and a bunch of other writers. I don't remember. That was like a graphic novel version of Creepshow, I think. Like a collection, maybe. I think New Stories. Wasn't very good. 2 stars. Not very good. The White Museum by George Bilgier. That was a poetry collection I read recently, and it was pretty good. Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep by Philip K. Dick. I will give it middle of the road, but I actually did not like that so much.
Yeah.
I liked a small chunk of that book, and the writing was okay. It's just the story was not what I was expecting, but I'm a Blade Runner fan, so maybe that's what threw me.
There's a decent idea in there.
Yeah, there's a good idea, not executed well. A Movable Feast by Ernest Hemingway. That was excellent. I recommend that. I was supposed to read it with me. You fucking didn't.
You gave me permission to bow out of that.
But why did I give you permission to bow out of that?
Because I think as you were reading it, you was just like, "Oh, Spencer's not gonna gonna enjoy this," without reading any of the stuff like that pertained with that.
Yeah, I guess. The Allegory of the Cave by Plato. That was really good, but you have to be a philosophy fan for that, Spencer. I like the allegory of the cave, but it's funny. It's one of those things I've always known about. I don't remember when I first heard about it, but I've never actually read it. You know, it's the guys in the cave, they see the shadows on the wall, and that's all they can see because they're facing the wall. So they think that's reality. One guy finally gets out, and he comes back and is like, hey, there's shit out there, dude. They're like, no, it's just shadows. Like, they can't get it. The Nice House on the Lake, Volume 1 by James Tinian. It was okay. I like the premise. I like the art. I like the idea. Maybe a little, I don't want to say overwritten, but too much happening.
Yeah.
Maybe too many characters. I would check out a Volume 2, though.
Yeah, because especially considering how the volume, it's only supposed to be like 2 volumes. It's only supposed to be like 11 or 12 issues. So it's kind of hard to completely judge it without that second volume being out yet.
Right. Powder by Tobias Wolff. That was my only Tobias Wolff I read. That was just a short story. That was recommended by a friend, and it was pretty good. And I ended the year, because I've been reading Jerusalem for 2 months now, I ended the year Collected Poems by Dylan Thomas that I've been reading for like 5 years on and off. I finally finished it. Excellent, but a lot of it just way over my head.
Way over.
Did not understand Mr. Welsh Dylan Thomas from the 1930s, 40s, and 50s or whenever he was writing that stuff. But he is one of my favorite poets because he has some of my favorite poems. But as his work as a whole, a lot of it I didn't really necessarily get. And also a lot of the language used, I don't want to say archaic, but I didn't know what the fuck it meant. You're up, sir.
Okay, so I started out the year with Sins of Scarlet from our good buddy Nicholas Obregon.
Excellent choice. That's a great book.
Yes.
Everybody should read Blue Light Yokohama, Sins of Scarlet, and then Unknown Mail.
Yep. Devil in a Blue Dress, which we talked about
That's
already.
a really good follow-up,
Yeah.
actually, because now you're going like older detective style,
Right.
noir detective, comparing it to a modern version. That's interesting.
Right. And then Gwendolyn's Magic Feather. It's the second book in the trilogy of the Gwendolyn books that were mostly co-written by Richard Chasmore and Stephen King, except this second one was completely written by Chasmore, and then the third one, I'll get to that later. Did you not mention this? The Gutter in the Grave? We read that for
Was that this year?
Well, I think so.
It wasn't on my list.
Huh,
I
don't
catalog them on Goodreads, and it has the dates.
Maybe I accidentally wrote that one down again, but
Well, hold on, let me check my. You can go on. I'll check my.
But just another hard case, another crime.
That was really fun, by the way.
Crime story, Stardust by Neil Gaiman. I really liked it.
That was one of my favorite gamings. It was a fairy tale, but a fairy tale I really enjoyed.
Yeah, I let somebody from work borrow it because she's a big fancy kind of reader. She didn't like it as much, but I think just because she has probably maybe a higher standard or something like that. But
well, there's a difference between fantasy and fairy tale, though.
True,
because you have to be specific. Yeah, it's the same genre kind of, but this is a fairy tale.
Yeah.
This is his take on a fairy tale, not a fantasy novel.
I didn't think about that.
Not like an elaborate fantasy. This is a fairy tale which has very specific rules. And I love Neil Gaiman's writing in it because it was so whimsical.
Yeah, and it's very creative and just it almost makes me want to check out that movie that came out a few years ago, but I don't think that'd be probably a good idea.
I thought about watching. I did watch it.
Yeah,
it was faithful enough to be entertaining, but it's not it's not
great.
Gutter in the Grave was December 12th, 2021, the end of last year.
Okay. Life for Sale that you let me borrow.
Oh, not to interrupt you, but you might have finished Gutter in the Grave.
Maybe that's what it was.
We would have to probably go off the recording because I probably finished it before because I recommended it to you.
Oh, yeah.
So I probably finished it first. So you might have finished it for the new year.
Maybe.
So that's really future.
Maybe that's what happened. But yeah, I really enjoyed Life for Sale. Just
your first, which is a very bizarre way to get into Yukio Mishima because it's not his writing style at all normally.
Yeah. But yeah, just about this guy who I forget why, but just decides he wants to give up on life.
He's pretty much sick of the rat race of life. It just is like, I'm going to put an ad in a newspaper. This is in the 50s or 40s or something. Like, I'm going to put an ad in the newspaper putting my life for sale. Whoever buys my life can do whatever they want with me.
And somehow just always ends up better for it.
He doesn't get killed. He wants to, but it just doesn't get killed. So he has to keep putting the ad out.
The Stranger, which was another one that you put me on to.
See, I read that last year, so that was another one. Yeah, you read the following.
But just about this, just about this guy who kind of just gets stuck in like a weird situation, and like just because of the way of he acts.
He's like autistic.
Yeah.
Before that was a thing.
Yeah, and just didn't really like. He never got worked up about anything, and it ended up.
He didn't show emotion, so people like considered him not just a weirdo, but like a moral person.
But it was really interesting, and then especially considering like how we said once you factor in like, oh, this guy was probably autistic, like we were saying before, like it's pretty interesting.
And now you can see like somebody's like, oh, what's fine literature have you read?
Yeah.
Well, I read Camus.
Yeah.
Like, oh shit, this guy's read some fucking philosophical literary fiction.
It did make me want to think about maybe trying something else by him. I don't know how.
Yeah, we have to look that up.
How his other stuff is written, but
wouldn't that be interesting if you found that your literary niche was French writers,
right?
French philosophy.
Well, that would seem about right. Gwendolyn's final task. This is the third in the Gwendolyn trilogy, and this is when Mr. King comes back and to help co-write it,
spices it up a little.
Well, it deals a little bit with like the Doc Tower stuff.
Oh.
But it was really good. This one's like the other two are kind of like really smaller, kind of not big books, like probably close to novelette. This one's like an actual like
girthy boy.
Yeah, like a full blown novel, but still read like super quick. The Ninth Metal by Benjamin Percy. He was this year is like I've noticed it was either like crime, like crime stuff, or I really dug into my comic book writers who also have novels and checking out that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So this is one of the comic book guys, both the Ninth Metal and then the Unfamiliar Garden are the first two in a trilogy of books about like how this meteorite crash lands into Earth. And I think it's a couple of different places on the planet and has this new metal and how it affects the Earth. Like in the Ninth Metal, it's more from like an industrial like mining and like this family who started mining the Ninth Metal and like now and that like how there's a struggle to keep a hold of who has the control of these mines and stuff like that. And the Unforgiven Garden deals more with like the biologically and like how it affects like the plant life and different things like that and all that. And then the third one that's supposed to come out, it was supposed to be this year, but it kept on getting pushed back to next year, the Sky Vault. I'm not 100% sure what that is dealing with, but I'm definitely interested to check it out because, like I said, they're a trilogy, but you don't really need to read them. Like, they're separate stories, but they're like kind of just set in the same universe. Like, if you read them, you would catch like little nods and things like that, but it wouldn't be anything to where if you read Unforgiven Garden but didn't read Ninth Metal, you'd be completely lost or whatever.
I always like that idea that you could create your own universe, but it doesn't have to be, the adventures of this person and that's all you get. Yeah. Like you could just tell any story you want and they don't have to be connected with anything. It's just the universe is just the connection. So which I guess it could be like from superhero stories. Everything's happening in the same universe, but completely different tales and adventures.
Yeah. And then the Scions of Titans that we talked about earlier, which I plan on getting more of on again this year. This year coming up. Then Frankenstein. As we talked about, I know we talked about it off air, but I think I might have got like a shitty copy.
Yeah,
but you didn't make it seem like it was much better. The one that
I think it's just really the ending that's different, honestly.
But yeah, I mean, okay. It's probably out of the older monster novels we read. It's probably my least favorite.
Let me just put this out here: Frankenstein isn't a bad book. People don't think Caleb's saying Frankenstein sucks and I hate Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. And I know I bitch about it and I thought it was boring. It's not a bad book. It's just it's too much of it's just not my wheelhouse because it's one of those things like we really like Dracula.
Yeah.
But I feel like there's a lot more action in Dracula. There's things happening. The story is progressing. Frankenstein had a lot of fucking fainting and like a lot of I would say it was more literary,
Mhm.
which was probably why we didn't enjoy it, because I didn't go into it thinking it was going to be a literary novel. Like, I know it's kind of literary, but I didn't think it was going to be like, oh, the philosophy of man and what is a human and, all that shit. It's like, I don't fucking want to read this for this. I want to see monster stomping heads. And
and again, we did that.
I wanted a good character piece, but
Yeah.
it felt like you only got that for a little bit. Then you got like too much Frankenstein, believe it or not. Not the monster, the fucking doctor. That's what got me. I didn't care about Frankenstein. I was really interested in the monster, and I liked his parts. But Frankenstein himself, fucking just go away, guy. You created the body, now just go fuck off.
And like we I don't know if we talked about it on air, but like it was really confusing to where like in Dracula, there's different people's notes, but like they label like, oh, this is from this person's journal, this is another person's journal. Like Frankenstein is like from a journal of a guy that Frankenstein runs into out in the Arctic. Him telling this guy his story, what this guy's writing. Like, it was very confusing.
Nobody wants to ever talk about how weird that last act is, too.
Yeah.
Like, the Frankenstein monster chases Dr. Frankenstein across open water to, like, the North Pole or some shit. It's like, what? And then they climb up, like, an ice mountain and have this dialogue. It's like, why is this happening?
Yeah.
Like, is this necessary? Like, what are we doing here? It's just, there was too much weird world navigating that all of a sudden happened out of nowhere.
Yeah. And then Chasing the Boogeyman, which we both really enjoyed. Probably one of it's probably up there in like the top like 2 or 3 probably of what I really enjoyed this year. Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, as we talked about earlier. The 10th Justice, which is another comic book guy, Brad Meltzer. This is his first book. It's I found it really enjoying. I read it in like a week, or like a week and a couple days, and especially considering with it being kind of like a political thriller kind of thing. I was really surprised on how much I enjoyed it and how quick I went through it. The Oracle Year by Charles Soule, another comic book guy, where this average like New York musician guy just wakes up with one morning with, I think it's like 180 something predictions just in his head, and as they slowly start to come true, and like how he kind of uses them to make money, and now the government's after him and stuff like that. I thought it was a very interesting sci-fi kind of story. Keeper from Greg Rucka, another comic book guy. This was like one of those books, because this and the 10th Justice were both like written like in the mid to late 90s, and you can kind of tell sometimes just because of like the way you describe things or some of the things you could do where you're like, oh, I don't think you would you do that, and you would use to say that way, but yeah, it deals a lot with like this guy who happens to be like a bodyguard security guy. He takes his girlfriend to they're going to go to have an abortion, and while they're there, the one of the head ladies who's like in charge of the clinic there hires him to be a bodyguard, because they're getting a lot of protesters, and there's supposed to be like this conference in a couple weeks, and one's gonna hire him and some of his other friends as bodyguards until that time, and try to figure out who's sending them these death threats, and things happen, and some characters don't make it and stuff like that, which was really good. And then the Study in Scarlet, like you said, with Sherlock Holmes. And like those are probably like the last of like the actual books that I read. And then I read some shorter stuff, all from Paulie Cooley, from the Dead Robot Society podcast, and the Black book that we read a few years ago.
We covered that. You did an episode on that, I believe.
Yeah. But there was 2. It's in this Turn You Down series where they're like, this guy is he either, I think he's like kind of like borderline like psychic, and how he kind of uses that. I can't remember exactly what happens in the 2 stories, but I do remember enjoying them a good deal. The longer out of these last couple ones, Tattoo, I thought was really good, and it's just about like this weird like kind of serial killer who takes tattoos off of people and uses like symbols of the tattoos, and it was really good. I liked it. And then Mimes, which I think you should read because I think you would like it because it's about this delivery guy who's on his second traffic. He just sees this mime like off to the side, and then just slowly throughout the day, just things get really fucking weird.
Those are all Pauly Cooley, right?
Yeah, all Pauly Cooley. And then I read all my comics, but the only ones I really talk about because each year I try to read a couple longer like multi-year run series. So the ones that I read this year was Thor from Jason Aaron. I read his complete run. They have them in these nice big 5 thick volumes. But yeah, that was a pretty good run. Like from start to finish, there was very little part like throughout that whole thing where I was like, oh well, this is kind of, might not be good, but it was all pretty much really good. Then Revival, which is there's like a small town in Wisconsin where for some reason in this town these people can't die, and it's not like zombies or whatever. It's kind of hard to explain without kind of really kind of going into it, but it deals a lot with these because and the town eventually ended up getting quarantined, and just that at a time it gets kind of even more into like dealing with the town members and how they're kind of dealing with it more than like, oh, people can't die right now. Like, it's a very interesting a character piece written by Tim Saley, who does a lot of good like horror and like image books and stuff like that. And then I didn't get to finish it, but I read a good chunk about I'd say about 13 or 14 volumes of Dr. Stone, which is a manga, which I think I've brought up before because in previous episodes, but basically just a thing happens that turns everybody on the planet into these stone statues, and thousands of years later, some of them start to break out, and in traditional manga fashion, the hero is this teenage kid who's super smart, one of the smartest people on the planet and stuff like that. But it does a really good job. It's very entertaining. And you might even actually be able to learn some things because they actually he dives into a lot of the science when they're like, oh, we have to make one of the newest things they're talking about, making rubbers for tires, and they go into the chemicals and how you could kind of how you could do this in this kind of setting and stuff like that, which I think is kind of cool and interesting. The art's really good and stuff like that. And like I said, I've read a whole bunch of other comics, but nothing that's not worth talking about, but just my normal weekly books and a lot of good stuff. But
I'll talk about this more in our next episode when we do our year in review. But you know what I didn't read this year, which I meant to? Some more Junji Ito. Fucked up mangas. Because I read Uzumaki, and I can't remember the name of the one with the girl now. It was his big one, but I actually didn't like that one. But I have a couple more of his big collections that I wanted to read. So maybe I'll do that. I'll describe it. Folks, you'll have to listen to the next episode. Because when we're going to do because I was going to be like, oh, should we do our, next year's reading? No, that's the goals episode. Yeah. So anyway, folks, you have anything to add to that? What was your sleeper book of the year?
Sleeper book?
What was one that surprised you the most?
Surprised me the most. I would maybe go with, because most of the
you had to go by your expectations.
Yeah, I was gonna say because most of the books I'd probably have a good idea that I was probably gonna enjoy them, just because either that I've read stuff from them. So I'd probably go my sleeper would probably maybe be Devil in a Blue Dress.
Oh, yeah.
Because I didn't really have any expectations for that. I never read anything from Walter Mosley before. I don't even think I really watched the whole movie either.
Yeah.
That's probably one of the most ones that I was going in blind to. Because some of the other ones that I really enjoyed, Chasing the Boogeyman, I figured I was probably going to like because I read those Gwendolyn books that he co-wrote, and stuff like that. So probably, I'd probably say the either Devil in a Blue Dress or maybe the 10th Justice were the ones that probably surprised me on how much I enjoyed them.
Very nice. Well, I guess that'll do it for us.
Yeah. Another decent-sized episode for you folks.
Yay, for Caleb having to edit it. We thank you for listening, and we hope, even though this episode comes out after Christmas, We hope you have a great Christmas, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, any holiday you celebrate or don't celebrate. And you know what? Just stay classy. And I'll just say it now, since the next episode that we do will drop after New Year's. Happy New Year's. So we're actually ahead at least on something.
Yay.
And stick around for the New Year's episode next week, because we will be talking about goals and all that fun stuff.
Yeah.
So we thank you for listening once again. Give us a review on Apple, iTunes, thingy or other, and any other podcast review places. Spencer is the knee knocker of Nepal. If you want to go on his OnlyFans this week, it's gross. He's actually just bashing people's knees with baseball bats like a mafioso. What a fucking jerk. He's not even getting paid to do it. He's just doing it. Not just strangers. I thought it was weird, but you know, that's it. To each their own. Also, you could check out my website, calebjamesk.com. Just all one word, calebjamesk. I've been posting a lot of stories and poetry and different things on there, and it's been getting some good feedback now, so check those out. Social media. You can check us out at DPW Podcast on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. That's about it, so thank you, and we will check you next time.